The heartbeat monitor's steady beep suddenly flatlined. Hope, a golden Labrador with dull eyes, stared blankly at the empty dog bed before her. 3 tiny paw prints pressed into the mud, the only remains of her lost puppies. For weeks she hadn't eaten, hadn't wagged, hadn't responded to anyone's calls. Then tires screeched outside. A ranger burst in, clutching a sodden bundle, urgency in his voice. 3 tiger cubs, mother's dead, they will last the night. Hope didn't react, until a faint whimper escaped the blankets. Her ear twitched. That sound, so painfully familiar, it mirrored her puppy's final breaths. The cubs lay motionless in their incubator. Finn, the smallest, breathed in shallow, uneven gasps. Scout, the middle cub, twitched with feverish dreams. Duke, the largest, stared vacantly at the ceiling, his eyes glassy and unfocused. Hypothermic, the vet murmured, shaking her head. They'll need a miracle. Across the room, Hope's ear flicked at the words. Then Finn coughed, a wet, rattling sound that froze Hope mid-breath. That cough, it sounded exactly like her puppy's last moments. Without thinking, she stood, her nails clicking against the tile floor as she moved toward the incubator. The staff held their breath as she approached. Hope stopped before the incubator, watching Finn's tiny chest rise and fall. Scout let out another weak whimper, a sound so fragile it seemed to fracture something deep inside Hope. Her tail gave the faintest twitch. Then, slowly, she leaned forward and licked Finn's face through the bars. The cub's eyes fluttered open, blinking up at her. A collective gasp rose from the staff. The vet moved to intervene, but Duke suddenly growled, his first sound since arrival, low and warning. Hope ignored them all, focusing only on the cubs. She licked Finn again, then Scout, who sniffed curiously at her paw. Duke watched, muscles tense, but made no move to stop her. Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Hope continued licking the cubs, her movements gentle yet deliberate. Finn nuzzled against her muzzle while Scout investigated her paws with growing curiosity. Duke remained still, watching intently, but didn't interfere. "That's not possible," the vet whispered, eyes wide. Hope paid no attention. She simply lay down beside the incubator, pressing as close as she could get. Finn immediately curled into her fur, his breathing already steadier. Scout nestled against her side. Even Duke seemed to relax slightly. Then, for the first time in months, Hope's tail gave a single, quiet thump against the floor. The staff exchanged stunned glances as the cubs settled against their unlikely protector, the storm outside growing louder. Duke's true nature revealed itself when the vet approached Finn. In an instant, the massive cubs slammed against the glass, teeth bared, a terrifying snarl ripping from his throat. But Hope moved faster. She positioned herself between Duke and the vet, meeting his wild gaze without flinching. The tension stretched, then broke as Duke suddenly licked Hope's ear, an unmistakable apology. The vet stumbled back, muttering, "That dog's either a saint or a fool." Hope didn't care about labels. She had more important concerns. Turning back to the cubs, she began methodically cleaning them, her rough tongue smoothing their damp fur. Duke watched, then surprised everyone by gently nuzzling Hope's shoulder before curling up beside her. The message was clear. She was theirs now. Scout's boundless energy became dangerous during playtime. His enthusiastic pounce sent Finn tumbling across the enclosure with a sharp yelp. The sudden silence that followed made Scout freeze, his playful demeanor vanishing. Hope was there instantly, but Finn was already limping forward to lick Scout's paw, immediate forgiveness. Scout's entire body trembled, then he vomited from sheer guilt. Duke watched the scene unfold, his golden eyes missing nothing. Then, in a move that shocked the observing staff, The massive cub lowered into a play bow, tail flicking invitingly. It was his first attempt at reconciliation, clumsy but sincere. Hope nudged Scout toward Duke, and the three tigers tentatively touched noses. The staff exchanged glances. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was family. The storm raged outside as the cubs huddled together, shivering despite the shelter. Hope began scratching at the dirt beneath their favorite oak tree. Finn watched intently, then mirrored her movements with his tiny paws. Scratch by scratch, a shallow depression formed. Duke caught on quickly, using his greater strength to widen the space, while Scout helped clear loose soil. By dawn, a crude but serviceable den took shape. Duke herded the others inside, where they curled together for warmth. Scout yawning widely, Finn immediately dozing off. Hope stood guard at the entrance, her body blocking the wind and rain. The staff observing through the cameras noted something odd in the footage, a shadowy movement near the broken fence line. "That dog's living on borrowed time," the vet warned, watching Hope lick Duke's forehead as he purred contentedly. "Tigers don't form attachments like this. Eventually, instinct will win." As if to prove her wrong, Scout draped himself across Hope's back, while Finn suckled her ear like an overgrown puppy. The vet turned to leave, then froze at what she saw. Duke's massive paw resting possessively on Hope's tail, not to harm, but to protect. The Labrador met the vet's gaze steadily, as if daring her to repeat the warning. Outside, the storm had passed, but the air felt charged with something else, an unseen threat moving through the tall grass. The security cameras caught a glimpse of something long and sinuous slipping through the damaged fence before the feed glitched.
Thunder cracked with earth-shaking force, revealing each cub's true nature. Duke, the fearless protector, whimpered like a cub and buried his face in Hope's fur. Scout paced relentlessly, his nervous energy needing an outlet. Finn dug compulsively at the den's floor, trying to burrow deeper. And Hope? She stood tall in the pounding rain, letting the hail strike her back instead of her charges. The staff watched in awe as she herded them to the den's safest corner, positioning herself as a living shield. Then a sound cut through the storm's roar, a branch snapping under unexpected weight. Hope's ears pricked forward, her body tensing. Something was moving through the undergrowth, something that didn't belong, something dangerous. In the storm's aftermath, Scout discovered a strange, ribbon-like object near their den. He pounced on the dry snakeskin, batting it playfully before losing interest. Duke sniffed the discarded skin, his hackles rising instantly. Hope growled deep in her throat, scanning the surrounding grass. The staff reviewing security footage later would notice the critical moment they missed. Scout tossing aside the warning sign as Duke caught the scent of musk on the wind. Then chaos erupted. A flash of movement from the bushes, a hiss that turned blood to ice. The cobra struck with terrifying speed, but Duke was faster. The sanctuary cameras captured every frame as he launched himself between Hope and certain death, the serpent's fangs finding his leg instead of their intended target.
The cobra's strike was lightning fast, venom dripping from curved fangs as Duke roared, not in pain, in warning. Hope didn't hesitate. She lunged, clamping her jaws on the snake's tail while Duke crushed its skull with one brutal paw. The staff came running, but it was over. Duke collapsed, his breathing ragged. Hope pressed against him, licking the wound frantically as Finn and Scout circled them, whining. The vet's hands shook as she injected antivenom. "He shouldn't have survived that," she whispered. Yet Duke's eyes stayed open, fixed on Hope. His message was clear: "I'd do it again." That night, the tigers didn't sleep. They formed a protective ring around Hope, their growls silencing the jungle. Duke's legs swelled to twice its size. His golden eyes glazed with fever as he panted, refusing food. Hope refused too, stationed at his cage door, snarling at anyone who came near. Scout brought his favorite ball, dropping it uselessly at Duke's paws. Finn did something astonishing. He dragged his water bowl to Hope, splashing it toward her with clumsy paws. "Drink, for us." The staff watched, humbled, as Hope finally lapped at it, then nudged the bowl back toward Duke. On the third night, the fever broke. Duke's first act? Licking Hope's face with a weak, rumbling purr. The vet wiped her eyes. "I've never seen anything like this." Outside, the repaired fence stood firm, but something else was coming.
The venom left Duke with a permanent limp, but he weaponized it. When a trespassing coyote stalked the enclosure, Duke played weak, dragging his leg pitifully. The coyote took the bait, creeping closer, until Duke sprang, pinning it with a snarl that shook the trees. Hope watched, tail wagging. Scout copied the tactic days later, faking injury to lure a vulture away from Finn. The staff began calling it Duke's trick. But the real test came at feeding time. Duke always let Hope eat first, even when his leg throbbed. One volunteer threw a steak too close to Hope. Duke's warning snap sent him stumbling back. The message? Respect her. The tigers had become more than family. They were a pack. "They're getting too big," the director said, eyeing Duke's 400-pound frame. "We're not equipped for adult tigers." Hope growled low in her throat, as if she understood. The staff argued until Duke settled it. A new volunteer reached to pet Finn. Duke's roar shattered windows, not in anger, in fear. The man's sleeve snagged on Finn's claw, and Duke reacted like he'd been shot. He herded the cubs behind Hope, trembling. That night, the director made the call. They'll go to the National Sanctuary tomorrow. Hope sensed the change. She spent hours licking each tiger's face, memorizing their scents. Scout brought her his favorite toy, a ragged teddy bear. Finn slept curled against her, and Duke, he stood guard, his bad leg shaking. The storm wasn't coming. It was here. Dawn revealed an empty enclosure. Hope was gone. Scouts found her deep in Finn's den, buried under leaves, her body shaking. Duke had to drag her out by her collar. The loading truck's engine roared like thunder. Finn pressed against Hope's side, purring desperately. Scout dropped his teddy bear at her paws. "Take it with you." But Duke did something that broke the staff. He placed his massive head against Hope's chest, listening to her heartbeat. Then he turned and boarded the truck without looking back. Hope's howl echoed for miles. The vet found her later, lying on Duke's favorite sunbathing rock. In her mouth, the teddy bear. She wouldn't let go, not that day, not for weeks. The sanctuary sent updates. Duke waited by the fence every sunset. But updates weren't enough. Hope was fading. 2 years passed. Hope was gray-muzzled now, her steps slower. The staff didn't notice when she vanished again until the phone rang. "You need to come," the National Sanctuary whispered. "Now." The drive took hours. Then, there he was, Duke, 600 pounds of pure muscle, pacing at the fence. Hope's bark cracked the air. Duke froze. His answering roar shook the earth as he sprinted toward her. Finn and Scout, now massive adults, barreled after him. The reunion defied logic. Finn groomed Hope's ears like he was still a cub. Scout knocked her over playfully. And Duke? He did what he'd always done. He stood guard. But now, his bad leg didn't shake. The director wiped his eyes. "Well, I'll be damned. She came home." Hope passed quietly in her sleep, curled between Duke and Finn, Scout's paw draped over her. The staff expected chaos. Instead, the tigers gently nosed her body, their whimpers softer than the rustling leaves. At dawn,
Duke carried her to their favorite sunspot and began digging. Finn brought the ratty teddy bear. Scout collected her favorite sticks. They worked in silence until the grave was deep enough. Then came the hardest part. Duke licked Hope's face one last time, just like she'd done for him years ago, before covering her with soil. The sanctuary staff wept. But the story wasn't over. That night, cameras caught Duke leading 2 new orphan cubs to Hope's grave. He nudged them forward, as if saying, "Meet your grandmother." The cycle continued, exactly as Hope would have wanted. Years later, visitors still hear the story, how a grieving Labrador raised 3 tigers, how one took a cobra's bite for her, how they mourned at her grave. The staff kept Duke's trick alive, training new rescues with his methods. Finn became the gentlest giant, nursing injured birds. Scout, he invented games for shy cubs. And Duke, he guarded the sanctuary's gates until his last breath, his limp a badge of honor. On quiet nights, rangers swear they see shadows, a golden dog with 3 massive shapes trailing behind her. The new cubs seem to know it too. They pause at Hope's favorite rock, tails wagging at nothing. Or maybe at someone. The sign still hangs by their enclosure. Love doesn't need the same blood, it just needs to fight. Some bonds, they're forever.
Duke's daily ritual began at dawn. The massive tiger would limp to the northern fence line, his bad leg dragging slightly through the dew-soaked grass. There he'd sit for hours, his amber eyes fixed on the dirt road where Hope had last disappeared. Sanctuary staff noted he always chose the spot where their scents mingled most, where Hope's paws had worn the grass thin from pacing. Finn and Scout will often join, though never with Duke's single-minded focus. At sunset, Duke would press his pink nose against the chain links, inhaling deeply as if catching some distant trace of her. The keepers began leaving Hope's old blanket near the fence, after noticing how Duke would curl around it, his rumbling purrs shaking the ground beneath him. Some bonds defied distance, some loves never faded. The phone rang during a routine feeding. The director's hand trembled as he listened, then shouted for quiet. Duke's head snapped up, a piece of meat forgotten in his jaws. "Hope's sick," the man whispered. The effect was instantaneous. Finn dropped his food, Scout sprinted to the fence, and Duke released an earth-shaking roar that sent birds fleeing for miles. That night, the sanctuary cameras captured unprecedented behavior. All 3 tigers gathered at the exact spot where Hope's scent lingered strongest. Duke stood sentry, while Finn methodically piled sticks into a strange pattern, almost like letters. Scout paced relentlessly, his whines carrying on the wind. At dawn, the director made another call. "We're bringing her," he said, watching Duke lick the fence wires. "However we have to do it." The morning after the truck took her boys' way, Hope's food bowl remained untouched. She lay on the rock where Duke used to sunbathe, her nose pressed against a gap in the fence where she'd last seen them. The staff tried everything: fresh steak, peanut butter, even her puppyhood favorite bacon. Nothing worked. On the 3rd day, Scout's ragged teddy bear disappeared from where Hope had kept it guarded between her paws. They found it later, carefully placed in Duke's old sleeping spot, now damp with saliva from being carried. The vet sighed. "She's trying to send it to them." That night, a volunteer slept in the enclosure, just to hold the old dog as she trembled through dreams of happier days. A month later, a package arrived from the National Sanctuary. Inside were 3 things: Duke's medical update, thriving; a tuft of Finn's fur, he shed this for you; and a photograph. The image showed all 3 tigers pressed against the fence at sunset. When Hope saw it,
She scrambled up, tail wagging for the first time in weeks. She licked the photo repeatedly until the staff laminated it. From that day on, she carried it everywhere, even sleeping with it tucked under her chin. The director made a decision. We're installing video calls between the sanctuaries. The first call connected, and Duke's thunderous roar of recognition made Hope spin in circles, barking wildly. Finn and Scout jostled to get closer to the screen, their massive paws leaving smudges.
For Hope's 10th birthday, the impossible happened. The National Sanctuary team arrived with a special trailer. When the door opened, Duke emerged first, now over 500 pounds of pure muscle. He froze upon seeing Hope, then bounded forward with surprising grace, nearly knocking her over as he nuzzled her entire body. Finn and Scout followed, their excited chirps belying their massive size. For 3 glorious hours, they played like old times, Duke gently wrestling Hope, Scout dropping toys at her feet, Finn licking her ears until she sneezed. When the visit ended, Duke carried Hope back to her enclosure himself, refusing to let staff intervene. As the trailer pulled away, Hope stood watching until it disappeared, but this time, her tail still wagged. She knew they'd be back. A hurricane warning forced emergency preparations. As rain lashed the sanctuary, Hope refused to leave her outdoor enclosure, standing sentry at the gate where Duke had last seen her. Lightning flashed, revealing her trembling body, not from fear but determination. The staff finally understood. She was waiting in case they came back for her in the storm. They had to physically carry her to safety. Inside the storm shelter, something remarkable happened. The other rescue dogs, who'd always kept their distance from the Tiger Mom, formed a protective circle around her. A tiny chihuahua even crawled into her lap. When the storm passed, Hope led them all back outside, her head high. She had a new purpose now. These were her charges too. Duke would approve.
Time passed. Hope's muzzle turned silver, her steps slower, but her spirit never dimmed. She took to patrolling the perimeter each morning, checking each fence post just as Duke had taught her. The staff noticed something extraordinary. The sanctuary's new rescue tigers all showed her deference, chuffing greetings when she passed. One day, a frightened new arrival growled at a volunteer. Hope intervened, standing between them and giving the young tiger a look that said, "We don't do that here." To everyone's amazement, the tiger lowered its head and licked her paw in submission. The director shook his head. She's not just a dog, she's one of them. That evening, Hope received her greatest honor, access to the tiger enclosures whenever she pleased. Her first stop? Duke's old favorite sunning spot. One afternoon, staff found Hope sleeping unusually deeply in the tiger enclosure. Her legs twitched as if running, her tail thumped rhythmically, and soft woofs escaped her muzzle. The watching volunteers whispered, "She's dreaming of them." When she awoke with a start, she looked around disoriented, then whined softly. That night, the sanctuary called unexpectedly. "You won't believe this," the keeper said. All 3 tigers were unusually restless today during Hope's nap time. Duke kept returning to the exact spot where he last saw her. The staff exchanged glances. Some connections defied explanation. From then on, whenever Hope had one of her vivid dreams, the sanctuary would call. The tigers were always agitated at the same time. It became their unspoken ritual, their bond transcending distance. They found her at sunrise, lying peacefully in the tiger enclosure. Hope had completed her final perimeter check, her silvered muzzle resting on Duke's favorite rock. The sanctuary fell silent as word spread. In a gesture that surprised no one, the staff allowed the resident tigers to say goodbye. Each came forward, some sniffing gently, others licking her ears, one young male even bringing his favorite ball to place beside her. As they prepared to move her, a volunteer gasped. Hope's worn photograph of the boys had somehow found its way from her bed to this spot.
No one could explain how it got there. That afternoon, the National Sanctuary reported unusual behavior. Duke, Finn, and Scout had all gathered at their fence line at dawn, staring southward for hours, waiting, watching, knowing. They buried Hope where she'd last slept, her grave marked with a stone engraved with 4 names: Hope, Duke, Finn, and Scout. Visitors often left toys there, especially stuffed tigers. Months later, something remarkable began happening. Newly arrived rescue tigers would visit the grave, some lying quietly beside it, others adding sticks or leaves in some instinctual ritual. The staff started calling them Hope's Cubs, regardless of age. The original photograph was framed in the visitor center, showing the 4 friends together. On particularly quiet mornings, veteran keepers swear they can still hear it, the sound of a tail thumping against the ground, followed by the distinctive chuffing call of tigers greeting an old friend. Maybe it's the wind, maybe it's memory, or maybe some bonds never break.
5 years later, an elderly Duke passed in his sleep at the National Sanctuary. They found him lying at the exact spot where he'd last seen Hope. Following his wishes, his ashes were brought home. The memorial service drew crowds, people who'd never met them, but whose lives they'd touched. As the director spoke, a sudden commotion erupted. Finn and Scout, normally sedate in their old age, began vocalizing loudly and pacing. At that exact moment, back at the original sanctuary, a new litter of rescue puppies, one golden Labrador mix among them, tumbled playfully onto Hope's grave, their barks echoing through the trees. The staff smiled through tears. The story wasn't ending. It was simply welcoming new characters. Some loves are too strong for just one lifetime. Today, if you visit at just the right moment, you might witness it, the golden afternoon light slanting through the trees as a breeze stirs the wind chimes near Hope's grave. The sanctuary's oldest resident tiger often comes then, lying heavily beside the stone with a sigh. Sometimes he brings offerings, a particularly nice stick, a clump of fresh grass. The staff don't interfere. They know what the visitors soon learn, that love isn't about species or time or distance. It's about the paw prints we leave on each other's souls. As the sun sets, the wind often picks up, carrying with it the echoes of barks and roars from years past, or perhaps from somewhere just beyond sight, where a golden dog runs once more with her 3 magnificent boys, together forever.